Okay, I'm alive, and we're talking about burnout again today. But today we're talking about imposter syndrome and the Dunning-Kruger effect. So, if you haven't heard of those two, I'm just going to give you a brief breakdown, right? So, the imposter syndrome is that feeling of inadequacy and self-doubt, despite having evidence of success, right? So, despite having evidence of success, you still feel inadequate. The Dunning-Kruger effect is an interesting graph that I found a few years ago, which for me is related to the imposter syndrome. It's basically this idea where those with low ability overestimate their ability, and those with higher ability underestimate their ability. And the graph is quite simple. It starts off where you learn a little bit about something and feel like you know everything, and you feel overconfident, and then you learn a little bit more and realize, actually, I don't know anything. And then there's this plummet that happens and you feel really inadequate, even though you've learned more than you did before. And then after that, there's this steady incline into being an expert, where you understand that actually you're learning more, but your confidence is only gradually increasing with the amount of knowledge that you learn, even though you then compare yourself to these other people who seem ridiculously confident even, and have no knowledge at all. So that's the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I think together, what ends up happening is it can impact on the low sense of personal accomplishment that is one of the symptoms of burnout. So this idea that you negatively evaluate your performance and you think everything you're doing is worthless or inadequate compared to others or whatever, and this can have an impact on your performance at work. It can have an impact on your performance at home, within your community. And part of what I've realized as well is that many of us can have this experience at some point in our lives, right? So we question our ability or our capability in one area or another, despite having evidence otherwise. And you can see this because we speak to people around us and they're giving us our props, but we don't internally believe it, right? That is not then an issue of evidence. It's not about what you've done. You have your CV, which is right there, your experiences, etc. But internally, you feel like you're not there, and partly it's because you understand now what the grasp of what you're doing is. Right, you realize what the gap between where you are and where you want to be is, and you have a better understanding of how far you are from it. But the problem is comparing yourself to the finished product as opposed to comparing yourself to where you started, right? So you end up feeling inadequate no matter what anybody says and no matter what you achieve. This can build up a stress within your body. And the evidence is formed because there was a study by the International Journal of Behavioral Science, and they said it was found that individuals experiencing imposter syndrome are more likely to suffer from burnout due to the constant fear of being exposed as a fraud. And this chronic stress can have detrimental effects on mental health and overall well-being. How you doing, Leslie? Welcome. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Good morning as well. It's amazing to have you on here. Any questions and stuff, by the way, let me know and I'll try and answer them as we go. It's hopefully going to be a relatively short one this morning, but I did want to go into it because it's definitely something I've had before in various areas, whether it being dance, whether it being architecture, and even now looking at the coaching and my journey on there. Sometimes you have this moment where you're like, oh, am I where I should be? Am I where I could be? And you're comparing yourself to the end product, even though you're still on that journey. Yeah, it can be based on the fear of criticism. It can be based on the fear of being inadequate and finding out you aren't actually what you think you are. It can be based on the fear of rejection. It can be based on the fear of abandonment. And, if people find out that I'm not who I say I am, or I don't know what I think I know, then they will leave. It can be based on all kinds of different fears, but fear in general as a root cause, definitely. So then the question is, what can you do to help reverse that effect? And there are three main things that I would say, right? Number one is building up your self-confidence. And the two ways I kind of look at it is internal and external. Self-confidence internally is to do with your mindset. It's how you view yourself. It's your self-image. It's knowing that you can rely on yourself based on what you can control. It's going through the motions and being like, okay, I know that these habits are going to continue to build my proficiency in this area. And if I continue to do this, then at some point my experience will grow. And so that is one way to do it internally. Then externally, the things you actually produce is celebrating those wins. It's understanding and going back regularly and looking at these list of accomplishments to reaffirm where you are within the ecosystem, right? So I'm really big on evidence as a I tend to be somewhat logical thinker, but sometimes I switch into the emotional as well. But if I feel inadequate in some spaces, then sometimes I just need to go through in my mind, okay, what have I done to get here? These people have brought me here, and I'm also have accrued all this knowledge in this area, and I can go through line by line all these things that got me here, and then I can rely on that as opposed to how I feel about it in the moment and continue to work. The second way is seeking support. So isn't it the actual consistent achievement that builds confidence? Yeah, consistent achievement does build confidence, but you also have people who consistently achieve who aren't confident. So going back to the Dunning-Kruger effect, you can still be achieving but not feel confident. Confidence is an inner thing, but it's attached to the outer things as well. But it's not just the outer things that builds confidence. It's how you see yourself. It's how you feel. It's what you believe about how the world works, what you believe about who you are as an individual person. It's based on your inner child, your inner teen, your inner adult being satisfied. It's all those things put together that come together to build this self-confidence. It's your self-esteem. It's how much you can rely on yourself. Do you feel safe within your body? Do you believe that you can take on any task? Do you believe that you can fail at a task and continue to live? You know, all those things are part of your self-confidence. At a really basic level, it's for me, it is, do I feel like I'm going to be okay? That is like, for me, is the root of self-confidence. Part of that is built on the evidence of the past. I have always gone through stuff like this and pulled through. I'm still here. But part of it is just knowing that no matter what the future brings, I'll be okay. Even if I don't like the outcome, even if, it's not as I would necessarily imagine it in my head, I'm still going to be okay. I'm still going to be here. That for me is the root of self-confidence. Do you believe that you are safe in your skin? You might be able to not rely on anybody else around you, but can you rely on yourself? And that is built on external and internal work. So the first one is building self-confidence, like I said, the internal and external. Second one is seeking support. So it's looking at who is in your network, your support system. Who can you rely on? Who have you built deep relationships with? Who can you talk to? Who can you crumble around? You might feel like you can't be fragile around certain people. You can't be vulnerable around certain people, right? And sometimes it's about building that relationship so you can, but other times it's about building relationships with the people you do feel like you can be vulnerable with, so you at least have somewhere you can go. And dealing with our built-in array of 6 basic fears, yeah, definitely, and dealing with those. And I think I'm gonna do a session on those 6 basic fears on another day, because I think that one deserves its whole its whole thing, like the attention, because it does. Fear in general creates stress within your body. That's where the cortisol comes out. So looking at in what ways those fears can come out can really look at what can contribute to our feeling of burnout, right? So ways you can accomplish this is, number one is building self-confidence. Number two is seeking support. I mentioned about building your network, your support system, but one of the reasons why it's important is, one, they give a place to be vulnerable, to be honest, to be yourself. Because one of the things about imposter syndrome is sometimes it's about wearing a mask. Like, you try and be this thing that you may not even believe you are. Even if you are, it's a real dichotomy in the mind, right? Which causes stress by itself. But you're putting on a mask, and you need somewhere to take the mask off and say, actually, I do have these fears. I don't feel perfect. I sometimes do worry. I try and be very honest when people ask me about certain things, where I say, if I'm not confident in something, I'll say so. I don't know if this is going to work, but I believe that if it was to work, it would have this effect, and that is worth pursuing, right? And if it doesn't work, then we can try something else. It's not the end of the world, right? As opposed to saying, yeah, it's absolutely going to work. Um, for me, being honest with myself is the most important thing, and being honest with other people, and building that space where I can be honest, so that it relieves some of that stress, that pressure of this mask that people sometimes put on themselves, right? But you need a network where you can do that, because sometimes we find ourselves, whether it's in our home, whether it's at work, whether it's within our community, if you don't have spaces to take this mask off and to be honest with yourself about your fears and what's going on, you'll never be able to acknowledge them, which means you'll never be able to address them. Yet the mutation is a great way to grow into the person you want to be. Yeah, and all of it is a process. It's a process, right? um, you recognize the gap, but then there's a journey between crossing that gap, and in that you build um, emulation, yeah, and you build this form of yourself which becomes the higher self, right? It becomes more resilient. One of the things that I've noted recently is, like, the first time you experience a heartbreak or a great disappointment, it is groundbreaking. Your worldview changes. I thought the world worked like this, but now it works. I realize this happens, which means that all I've built my confidence on is risking shattering now, and I don't know what to rely on, right? So the first time you experience those big disappointments, it can break your worldview and even your self-view, and you have to go through a big restructuring. But then the second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th time it happens, you realize, actually, no, I've been through this before, and I know that how it works now. I know that, you can always rely on these people. I know you cannot not always rely on these things. And now, even though it does disappoint me, it doesn't destroy my view, because now I know how the world works. And then you can continue to grow as a result. That's all part of it as well, right? Um, and the third thing, so remember, the first thing you can do to help reverse the effects of imposter syndrome and the Dunning-Kruger effect, one, is building self-confidence. And that could be actually, building your skill as well, taking another course, building your knowledge. Like I said, seeking support, building your network, going to events, speaking to people, getting affirmations and validation from other people as well as yourself. Number three, though, is reframing your negative thoughts. Now, in our mind, I feel, is the greatest battlefield of all. It's our belief systems, it's our negative thinking, it's our challenges. All of those things happen within our mind. And that is where the biggest challenge often happens to be. And so part of what that is reframing your thoughts. So it's thinking about, what is this thought and how can I look at this differently, in a way for me to either look for a way of growth, or look at it in a way that puts me in a better light, that is more resilient and able to complete this task, or achieve this thing that I'm looking at. So an example of what that might be is, I don't feel like I'm adequate enough for this role. However, this is an opportunity for me to grow, right? So changing it from something that will cast fear to something that can cast excitement. Maybe it's an experiment instead of something that you're putting your entire life and soul into. This is something where I just want to try. I've experienced all this kind of stuff in this area, and this is an opportunity for me to be a beginner again, right? Yeah, polar opposite for reframing. I am terrible. But the only thing with that is, there is also, I've seen effects and exercises where you say, what is the fear? And you write the complete opposite, and you kind of like affirm yourself that way. And sometimes that works, right? Sometimes that works. So it says, I am inadequate, and then you say, I am adequate, right? And there's that, sometimes that works in the sense that if I keep saying it, there's an element of me which will train my mind to look for the evidence of that, right? And then I start to believe it over time. But what I find is, sometimes, depending on the person though, some people it doesn't work with straight away. For some people, you need a little bit more of a process before you can get across that chasm. And part of that for me, for example, is not saying what I don't feel to be true, but it's about finding a way to look at it, which is what I was talking about, reframing it in a way that I can use the best of what is true. So instead of saying the glass is full, it's saying, no, the glass is half full. It acknowledges the fact that the glass is half empty, but you're reframing it. Instead of looking at the bit that's half empty, you're looking at the bit that's half full. I'm trying to think of an example right now. If I think I'm inadequate and I say I'm not, um, like I am not financially secure, right? Let's say, for example, I'm looking at my finances. Instead of saying I am rich, for me, it's about saying I have the capability to build wealth. That for me is better than saying I am rich instead of I am poor, because I know internally I am not rich, whatever that definition is. So, what I do have, though, which I can affirm, is the ability, the capability to build wealth. That is true. So, when it comes to reframing, just being careful. If you're the kind of person where you can say the opposite and that can help build your confidence, then cool. But if you're not, trying to reframe it in a way that you can find a truth that is true and is true, that is true, that is true. And that is something you can build on. Um, yeah, faith is the substance of things not seen, right? So, yeah, money is coming to me and I'm grateful. Exactly. All those things, right? Faith to me is believing that what is current is not permanent. So you believe in another possibility that's going to come, right? And you believe in it, right? So so yeah, those are the three things I wanted to focus on today in terms of combating um imposter syndrome and the Dunning-Kruger effect. Number one is building self-confidence. Number two is seeking support. And number three is reframing your negative thoughts. And this is something that we need to do daily, whether it's at the end of the day, beginning of the day, or through the day when you have a moment. Ponder on these things. How do you feel? Where is this feeling coming from? Is this something that is true, or is this something that is assumption, or something that I've connected dots that don't need to be connected? Right? What can I do about this? What can I do about this today? What can I do about this? How can I get to a stage within 3 months, 3 years where this won't be an issue anymore? What do I have in my control that I can work on right now? And we have perfect faith in our fears because they are true. Yeah. Do you know what's funny, actually? Faith, right? We often talk about faith in a positive, right? I believe that this is going to be a great thing that happens. And I remember having a conversation with an atheist once when I was younger, and they said, "Oh, I don't have faith," and I was like, "Actually, no, you do. You have faith that there is nothing after death, for example. That takes faith. You have to believe. There's faith to believe that all of this is an accident. In the same way as how we can believe that we are going to be successful, some of us have faith that we're going to be unsuccessful. But the thing is, faith is what is belief in something that is unseen. So coming back to the reframing, it's about looking at how we can reframe it into something that is going to serve us, right? And sometimes we might be completely oblivious to the fact that we are believing in things that aren't going to serve us, that we don't have to believe. The things aren't true yet. And we do actually have the power in what we can believe. Faith in action, absolutely. Right. So there was a study in Harvard Business Review that showed that implementing strategies to combat imposter syndrome, like mentoring programs as well, if you're looking at the work environment, and confidence building workshops, can lead a significant decrease in burnout rates amongst employees. Like we said before, all the stuff we mentioned builds stress within our bodies, our minds, our emotions, our cortisol levels, right? And over time, that dealing with this, mentoring programs, looking at support, building up our skill sets, building up our network of support systems, reframing our negative thoughts, and teaching ourselves how to do that so that on a day-to-day basis, we have the tools to be able to do that in the moment, can help reduce that stress, which helps us avoid burnout completely. And then repeat it consistently, as this is the process of creating faith. 100%, repeatedly, daily, right? Our daily bread. So it's important to do that. One of the things that I found about burnout is some of the things that we do daily fall off the table, right? And it can be really difficult. Like I genuinely, like I said, I've experienced burnout before, which is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about helping people through it. But when you're in it, some of the things that do help us out of burnout, we lose touch with, right? It's the little things, even things like hydrating ourselves and taking regular exercise fall off. So when it comes to our positive thinking, we are we what's it called? We reacclimatize to a negative state. We feel negative and we look for negative things to affirm that negative feeling. And it can be a daily thing to be like, okay, no, I'm going to choose positive this morning. I'm going to choose positive in this moment. I'm going to choose positive in this conflict. I'm going to choose to believe that there is a way that we can both come out of this conflict feeling like we're both winners. I'm going to choose that there is a way for me to get to the end of the year and find myself in a better financial situation. I'm going to choose um, that what I've experienced in the past doesn't have to be what I'm going to experience in the future. I'm going to choose these things, and it needs to be a daily thing, because during the day you're going to have all kinds of different thoughts and experiences that are going to try and convince you otherwise. But you have to continuously build that muscle in your mind to keep finding these things, right? Giving up of things we value, absolutely. And that can build stress as well. Let's say, for example, family is a big value of yours, but then all the stress at work is meaning that you're having later nights, which means that you have spending less time with your family. And then what ends up happening is that you feel this conflict within your body, because the thing that replenishes you, you're having less of, and the things that are depleting you are increasing, right? Sarah says, "Oh, what's going on, bro? Good morning, Andre. I was wondering what platform you're using for your live broadcasting." I'm using Restream right now. Restream is what I'm using, and it allows me to stream to LinkedIn, YouTube, and I'm also got my phone doing Instagram on the side. So yeah, hope this has been valuable to you. Today was just looking at imposter syndrome and the Dunning-Kruger effect. And like I said, if you're not familiar with those two, have a look at them. Just to recap, the imposter syndrome is really the feeling of inadequacy or self-doubt despite evidence of success. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is, in short, where those with low ability overestimate their ability and they think they're the best when they're not. Whereas those with high ability underestimate their ability, because now they realize how much there is to know and they're comparing themselves to the finished product, right? And it's one of these things where I find that ignorance is bliss sometimes. The more you know, the more you realize you need to know. And then you humble yourself as a result. And that can add to your imposter syndrome. Okay. So I hope this has been valuable to you today. If you're experiencing any of this, remember those three things: build your self confidence internally and externally. Number two is seek support and build your network of support system. And number three is reframe your negative thoughts. And if you have struggled with those three, get in touch. I'm an executive coach and I help people recover from burnout and also avoid burnout. So if this is something where you're like, oh, I'm starting to feel the symptoms and I don't know what to do to avoid it completely, or building up the muscles to, or the systems or the strategies to be able to avoid it in the future, then get in touch. There's a discovery call. If you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, there is a code just here, and I'll try and put the link in my bios on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where you can book a discovery call. It's 30 minutes. Part of it is going to be talking about what you're actually going through, so you can get actually something from it. And then at the end of it, if you feel like you need more help, I do run programs which are 6 or 12 weeks long, and that will help you through it, because burnout isn't reversed in a day. A lot of the time, it's that, like we said today, is consistent effort. So thank you very much for spending time with me, and thank you, Leslie. I appreciate that. You are very bright about these things. Yeah, I do try. I do try. And like I said, some of it is about the research and the learning, etc. But a lot of it is from experience, unfortunately. I've been through burnout a number of times. And these are just the things that I've learned, but also helping to help other people get through it as well. So thank you very much for today. I'm going to try and come back to doing this either daily or weekly. I'm not sure yet, as and when I get uh, inspiration, I'll jump online and have one of these calls. If there are any questions, if there are any topics you want me to cover, put them in the comments and I will make sure to cover them. Whatever you're up to today, make sure you build your self-confidence, make sure you seek support, make sure you reframe those negative thoughts. And I'll see you again soon.